Hello and welcome to Pittsburgh Sports Memories Podcast. As usual, I'm your co-host, Steve Wirt, and I'm joined by...
Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Hannon.
And today we're going to be covering the 1925 World Series, which I think Tim was there. You covered it, right? You were right there sitting in Forbes Field cheering on the Pirates.
Such great memories. But to be serious, Steve, I am looking forward to this episode just because, I know a ton about Pittsburgh sports. It's the reason I love doing this podcast. But I could tell you nothing other than the team we played about the 1925 World Series. So I'm very excited to learn.
Yeah, there's actually some controversial stuff that happened, and there's some interesting things, and there's some people that you'll recognize, maybe some people you won't. But so the 1925 World Series, like we said, it's often forgotten in Pittsburgh sports history. It's not even covered really in the Ken Burns baseball documentary. If you notice, like they skip right from 1924 to 1927 for obvious reasons, but so even in Pittsburgh, I think some people have covered it. I found some Post-Gazette articles back, and it's, what are we? So 2 more years, it'll be 100 years since we won that World Series. So maybe in 2025, some more stuff will come out about it, but,
we're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, there you go. We're 2 years ahead. So everybody can copy off of us. So the background, we'll start with the other team that was in the series. That would be the Washington Senators. So actually in 1924, they had played the New York Baseball Giants, which is going to be so much fun talking about this because I get to see the New York Baseball Giants. So, which are the team that is now the San Francisco Giants, and for everybody who doesn't know. And actually in 1924 was a great World Series. They won in a 12-inning game in the 7th game went 12 innings in a guy named Muddy Rule, which is just, whoever named him that is just awesome. He scored the winning run for Washington. In 2020, ESPN voted that the 3rd greatest World Series game ever. I can imagine why. I mean, that seems like an awesome game. So in 1924, also the Senators were the first team to start the tradition of visiting the White House after winning the World Series. And I think they actually did that while this World Series was going on. And just for reference, Calvin Coolidge was the president back then. And I think he was rooting, which would make sense since they were kind of the hometown team. And, the Washington and the president, and I guess all the teams since have visited the president, except for, did the baseball team still visit when Trump was there? I don't know when everybody went.
I didn't keep track, but wait, You're saying that during the 1925 World Series, they visited the White House to celebrate the 1924
I think they did, if I have the timing correct.
Wow, that's kind of interesting.
I think it's just the way it kind of was hey, wouldn't it be cool? And so
did Twitter have a fit about that?
Yes, I think all the all across the telegraph lines, it was I guess they had radio, all the radio guys, Bob Hope, and Bob Hope might not have been on the radio yet. I don't know. But so in 1925, the Pirates, this would be their first pennant in appearance in the World Series since 1909. And we get to say "ought" because it's more fun and old timey. So, so they hadn't been in the World Series. They had a little bit of a World Series drought. Could you imagine that? The Pirates having a World Series drought, Tim? What a shocker.
Yeah, 16 years between World Series appearances. That must have been rough on the fan base.
I know. I mean, who could ever go that long? You know? So, actually, though, in 1924, the season before, they had actually won 90 games. But nowadays, imagine if the Pirates this year won 90 games, the celebrating and dancing in the aisles would be amazing. But back in 1924, that got you a 3rd place finish in the National League. So it was great season, boys. See you next year. And I guess they had obviously finished behind the Giants, and I didn't look up somebody else. So, which is kind of interesting. Like we've talked about the before, like the Pirates and the Giants have been playing each other forever, and that would be the baseball Giants. So in 1925, they finished the season with 95 wins. So they win five. They win 5 more games, and that was enough to win the National League pennant by 8.5 games over those famed New York baseball Giants. So I guess the New York baseball Giants were pretty good around that time. They, always in the mix. So basically set the stage. The Senators are looking to go back to back with World Series wins. At that time, it had been done 4 times. The last was once again those Giants. Boy, those Giants were good back then. 1921, 1922, and the first time was the Cubs in 1907 and 1908. And I'm sure the Cubs after 1908 are just going to be right back in the World Series, aren't they, Tim? Winning another World Series. I like making fun of Cubs fans. I don't know why.
No opposition there.
So the date of this series, it happened from October 7th to October 15th, 1925. So, you got to have a scorecard to know the players. So we'll kind of go through the important players and people that were going on, since I doubt anybody really knows who these people are. And we might have heard about these on previous podcasts if you listen to some of ours, other ones. So we'll start with the old buccos there. Barney Dreyfuss, he was a successful owner of the Pirates. He'd owned the Pirates for a long time. I think he actually was one of the people who brought them over from Louisville. He did not like cheap home runs, and he was the guy who actually built Forbes Field and made it so huge because he didn't like cheap home runs. Under his ownership, the Pirates would win 6 NL pennants and 2 World Series. He also helped get Kennesaw Mountain Landis as the commissioner of baseball, and that's kind of important significantly because in 1919, if you ever watched the movie 8 Man Out with, who's in it, John Cusack, and I can't forget who else, a bunch of people were in it.
The
But
dad
that's
from
the
Frasier.
Yeah,
Just the manager.
Jim Mahoney, yeah. And another guy too is like been like the pitcher, the one pitcher, he's been in a ton of stuff. That's the Black Sox scandal. They are paid to throw the World Series by a bunch of gamblers, and whether Shoeless Joe was involved or not, but Shoeless Joe would eventually see his redemption in 1989 Field of Dreams movie. Yeah, right. Sure.
That's true.
Or maybe not. So, that kind of, they had to clean up baseball after 1919. You figure that's only 6 years removed from that, right? Yeah. And so it was still kind of, they had to make sure that people didn't think the games were fixed because, this isn't wrestling and people would like, the games to be legitimate. Funny thing about that. So the actual manager of the team was a guy named Bill McKechnie. And if you're an older time, you might recognize his name. He was the original deacon on the Pirates. And this is an interesting thing with this team. A lot of like upstanding people. I don't know if it's just, in the papers that was their image or if they really were, but maybe they really were. I don't know. He was an unusual manager. He was very religious. He did not smoke, did not drink, did not use profanity. When he had a problem with a player who was likely to go out carousing, because what McKechnie would do, Tim? He would go and actually become his roommate. So I guess that was like, if you were out like spending the late nights drinking or whatever and chasing the ladies, you weren't doing that. The manager was going to be now sleeping next to you, and that would be tougher for you to do, I guess.
Interesting approach. I guess that must have worked because I can see you not being able to sneak out anymore if the manager's your roommate.
According to Baseball Reference, this is after his time with the Pirates. McKechnie had a poor sense of direction, and he would later manage the Reds, and he was supposed to play the Pirates at Forbes Field, and he like flew a plane, which what he thought was to Pittsburgh, and said, hey, can you get me to the Shenley Hotel? And the taxi driver's like, oh, never heard of it. And then he said, how about some nearby streets? He's like, no. He's like, I've never heard of them either. And then McKechnie's like, well, how long have you been driving a cab here? And the guy's like, 25 years. He said, well, I can't know. And then he's like, wait a minute, you're in the wrong town, the cab driver.
Oh
He's
my.
like, "Where do you think you are?" And he's like, "I'm in Pittsburgh." And the cab driver's like, "Nope, this is Detroit." Whoops. Literally got on the wrong plane.
Wow.
So yeah, so he had played actually for the Pirates and he'd hit 251 and he had played some in the infield. So another guy that we've talked about before is Fred Clark. And he was one of the players that Dreyfus had brought in from the Louisville Colonels with Honus Wagner and some of the other players that made that dynasty team of the early aughts. He still is the Pirates' most successful manager to this day. He had actually managed from 1900 to 1915. And what had happened was he had bought some property in Kansas, and lucky for him, they found oil on it. So this guy just ran into a ton of money. So when you got more money and that you know what to do with, you ask Barney Dreyfus if you can become like a minority owner. So that's what he did. And so since he was now an owner, he was allowed to sit in the dugout with poor Bill McKechnie, which is really not fun. So imagine, like, the only way I can relate this to, the only thing I can think of, imagine if like Bill Cowher was like, hey, Mr. Art Rudy, can I have a part ownership in the team like so many other people? Or like David Tepper was like when he was a part owner, can I be part owner? And then like David Tepper's like, hey, I'm going to go down and hang on the sideline and literally question every decision Mike Tomlin makes. How do you think that's going to work out?
Yeah, that would be awkward to say the least.
Yeah, so it was just a little weird situation, and that's just that's kind of how it went that season. So, and in our aftermath, there's a little bit of aftermath that comes from all of this. So now some of the players there's I think I'm going to focus on 3 or 4 players that were really, all these guys are Hall of Famers, and which is kind of weird that we haven't heard of them. So this guy, the first guy, is called Max Carey, and his birth name, which is really awesome, is, I think, if either of us have any more children, we should name him this, Tim, especially if it's a boy. Maximilian George Carnarius. So
Nice.
that's a heck of a mouthful there. So they just went with Max. I can't see why. He had actually replaced Fred Clark in left field in 1912. So so the guy who you replaced is now your manager. So I'm sure that's all gonna work out well for everyone involved, right? His nickname was Scoop for his ability to catch fly balls in front of him. He had a mark of 738 stolen bases, and it remained a National League record until Lou Brock surpassed it in 1974. In 1924, Carey altered his batting stance based on Ty Cobb's. I've heard that before, like people kind of changed the way, so that actually helped his batting average. And he was another one. He was involved in religious activities. He attended a theological seminary in the winter. So that was interesting. So they have a couple of reverends and deacons on the team. Interesting.
Wow, the crowd today that thinks Tomlin doesn't have any discipline on the Steelers would have loved this team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of how that generation was too. You figure this is, and I forgot to mention, this is the height of prohibition. So like, there's a lot of like that generation, I think, was very like upstanding. They didn't want to smoke, didn't want to drink. Maybe it's an overreaction, to some of the other things that were going on, like people, having all those addictive issues. Sometimes people overreact the other way. So
yeah, it's probably one of 2 things. Probably either that camp or the camp of no, like we just don't tell anybody what we're doing kind of thing. I mean, that
and this
era.
is the papers too. So like if you want an interview with, Max or Maximilian here, you're not going to report on him
Right.
running around with ladies and drinking.
Right. Not saying he was. I mean, again, these guys are probably sincere in what they believe. Just saying that for every one of those guys, there was probably a guy or 2 that was, doing stuff that no one would have ever found out about.
like beating people up in the stands. Oh no, that was Ty Cobb. And nobody even, yeah, nobody hit that one.
No.
So another guy, this guy was named Kiki Kyler, I think, and his real name was Hazen Shirley Kyler. There's another name for you. Kyler led the National League in stolen bases 4 times, so they got some speed on this team. I don't know how good catchers were back then, but apparently, he scored 2 times, and he had a batting average over 350 on 4 occasions. So his 26 triples in 1925 were the second most triples in any season after 1900. Plus 2, you figure like Forbes Field is a really big field. So if you hit something that might have been a home run in another field and you have any kind of speed, you're probably going to get a triple, Pie Trainer, he a fun fact, he was the original choice of Mr. Burns to play third base on the Springfield Power Plant baseball team. If you remember that episode, Homer at the bat. That was the infamous line by Mr. Smithers. Your left fielder's been dead for 70 years. He was replaced by Wade Boggs when they actually had to field a team of current players in 1989 or whatever that was. So poor Pie Trainer, he didn't get to play on Mr. Burns' Power Plant softball team there. But he did get to play in the 1925 World Series. So in 1925, Trainer posted a 320 average with 6 home runs, 106 runs batted in, and led the league in fielding percentage. I don't know how they even figured that out. I guess they kept track of everything even back then. So, he's ranked number 70 on the Sporting News list of 100 greatest baseball players in 1999. He's been a finalist for the Baseball All-Century team. He has a key play later. He hit a home run in the series that was pretty important too. So I guess we'll talk about the other team, the other guys, the Washington Senators. The most probably guy you probably know about him is Walter Johnson. He was he actually in 1917, a munitions laboratory, like they had a chronograph and they didn't have radar guns back then because radar wasn't developed, so they couldn't like clock how fast a pitch was going. But they had like these things called chronographs, and if you could pass it through 2 points, you could kind of do the math and figure out how fast something was going. That's how they figured out how fast a cannonball or a bullet was going. So they let Walter Johnson go up there and throw a baseball through it, and they clocked it at 134 feet per second. And if you're saying, what the heck does that mean? It's equivalent to 91 miles per hour. So Walter Johnson, and this is like, Walter Johnson could definitely pitch in today's Major League Baseball at 91 miles per hour, throwing that's good enough to get you in the majors even today. So almost 100 years later, he was good.
Yes.
It was unmatched at that era. He had a sidearm motion and Johnson, it was difficult for right-handed batters to pick up. And he threw an occasional curveball, which, oh my goodness, if you're going to throw 91 miles per hour and then switch speeds to some sort of curveball, it's probably going to be hard to hit. So him and Honus Wagner were known as the 5 Immortals because they were the first players chosen for the Baseball Hall of Fame. I can't remember. It's him. I want to say is Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and
Cy Young, maybe.
Jimmy Fox, maybe.
Christy Mathewson. I mean, it could
No,
have been any
actually, Christy Mathewson comes in like there. I have a note about Christy Mathewson. He actually died on the first game of the World Series this year due to he was in World War I and he had been exposed to
gas.
The nerve gas. Yeah, the phosgene, the mustard gas as they called it. And he didn't die, but it messed up his lungs so bad he couldn't play baseball no more. And then he actually did die in September of this, or October, I guess, of this year. So sad note about that. Walter Johnson at the time in 1925 was 37 years old, but he had won his first World Series the year before. And going into the Game 7, you were going to notice that he had already won 2 games for the Senators. So he's kind of like their big guy. 12 pitchers have won 3 games in the World Series. The last guy to do it was a guy named Mickey Lolich in 1968 for the Tigers of Detroit. So it's not common to win 3 games in a World Series. So it's not easy. So he's definitely a Hall of Famer. Great. There's a guy named Roger Peckinpah. He was appointed manager, but Bucky Harris was the manager, but this guy was his assistant manager. He was a key contributor in the 1924 World Series. He was actually most valuable player in 1925. I think he was their shortstop. And Peckinpah comes into play. He makes some really bad errors in this series. He makes a lot. He has a really bad series in the field. As for the owner of the Washington Senators, it was a guy named Clark Griffith. He was a successful player turned owner. He was known to run the team on a cheap budget. Imagine that, a baseball owner running the team on a cheap budget, Tim. Can you imagine
shameful.
the
It's
thought?
a good thing. It's a good thing
The
they've
thought.
weeded that kind of stuff out of the game.
Yes,
Thank goodness.
I am shocked and surprised. So, he signed a lot of players from independent leagues. They didn't even have a farm system. The Senators didn't even have a farm system. So I guess he was just like, back then maybe it wasn't as bad because there was kind of people all over the place. It wasn't as defined, the minor leagues. So another fun guy who plays a key is Stan Kovaleski. He was a pitcher. He had pitched with the Philadelphia Athletics and the Cleveland Indians. And he had came to the Senators that year. And the best thing about Stan Kovaleski was he was a spitball pitcher, Tim. And you might say, hey, Steve, isn't spitballs illegal in 1925? And I would say, yes, you are correct. But he was grandfathered in, so he was still allowed to throw spitballs.
Oh, you're kidding. That was how they did
it? Yeah.
Didn't they outlaw it when the one guy for Cleveland got killed? Isn't that what?
I think it is. At the beginning of 1920, the spitball was banned, but he was grandfathered in. So
that's what happened. There was a guy, for Cleveland who
got hit in the head.
They
didn't wear helmets back then, and I don't know if they didn't have plastic. So I don't even know what. Like they would have had to warn like a World War One. Like even in World War One, they didn't wear helmets. Like at the beginning of the war, so I don't know what you would have worn. Like one of those weird looking helmets the British and the Americans wore. Were like,
but supposedly, they didn't have helmets, and supposedly he
couldn't get out of the way of the ball.
Like usually if something like that. If it flies at your head, you're going to flinch or you're going to like put your arm up or something, but he never even saw it because of the way it kind of weaved in the air because the Yankees pitcher had, put a bunch of gunk on it. So that was one of the public kind of outcries, like we need to outlaw this. But I guess if you did it before 1920, you were still allowed to do it. That's really goofy.
Yeah, maybe they should have. I was thinking this while doing this. Maybe they should have done that with the steroids. Just like, okay, no one past like X 2004 is allowed to use steroids anymore or whatever. But Barry Bonds and all you're still allowed to use steroids.
Or like James Harrison still allowed to hit the quarterback in the head because he was doing it before they made the rule.
There you go. Yeah. He's still allowed to rough the quarterback.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine? But be that as it may, Kovaleski had won a lot of games. He actually played a key role in the series. He was another guy who didn't have a great series. So a guy named Goose Goslin, he was their left fielder. He was one of the top run producers in the American League with 129 RBIs. He had a really good he had a good 24 World Series. 6 hits. In the 25 series, he batted .334 with 72. Or no, that was 1925. He batted .334 with 72 extra base hits and 113 RBIs. He's another guy who had a lot of triples, 20 triples. So I guess we're still not quite in. We're coming out of the dead ball era into like the home run era. So
yeah, that was a decade of Babe Ruth and everything. I also love all the nicknames, Goose Goslin and Pie Trainer. Did anybody go by their real name? I guess Walter Johnson.
Yeah. Well, he was the Big Train, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah,
he,
but I mean, but he actually had like a first name. Everybody else has like a nickname as their first name. It's
that
like
was
Harold Arthur, Pie Trainer. I don't know what his real name was, but
now the real manager of the Senators was a guy named Bucky Harris, and he played second base. So it was like a player manager. They didn't actually have a manager. Isn't that's like wild? It's like if Neil Walker was just like playing second base still and managing the Pirates, or I don't know who's on the Pirates now, who would be, I don't know. That old guy, Rich Hill, he could be the manager and a pitcher, I guess. He's old enough. But
another great
I
nickname, Bucky
yeah.
Harris.
Yeah. Um he had he was actually at the age of 27. He was the youngest manager in the majors. So he had led his the Washington to the series the year before. He was nicknamed the Boy Wonder. There you go. Like I think the papers just, you got to have a catchy headline. There was so much you got to let's think of a nickname. Yeah, he's the Boy Wonder. So, let's see. And he had played let's see. Let me see if I say it was 1925. 1920, he had a career high 227 hits, 87 RBIs, and 350 batting average. Boy, people really hit for average back then. Nobody hits for average anymore. It's either strikeout or home run. But once again, I think the fields were bigger, and I don't know. It was just a different game back then. A lot more hit and run, not a lot of and I mean walks too. But so, something else that came into play is the weather. Like, could you imagine the weather was not great in October in Pittsburgh, Tim? Imagine that. So that's going to play kind of like, a key thing in our thing. So the series is set. We got the Pirates and the Senators, and I don't know. I guess it's maybe the alternating thing. The Pirates actually have the home field advantage. Game 7 will be played in Pittsburgh. So go figure, right? So game 1, it's this game actually is the last road series game that the Washington Senators have won. So if you include them in the team they've become, which we'll cover later, they got on the board. A guy named Joe Harris hit a home run off of one of the Pirate pitchers, Lee Meadows. They made it 3-0. Pie Trainer had a leadoff home run in the 9th, and Goose Goslin hit a leadoff single. So that's the last World Series that franchise has won. Now that they kind of exist, but not in Washington anymore. Walter Johnson was the pitcher, and he pitched a 1-run game with 5 hits. It looks like. So pretty good. The winner, obviously, Walter Johnson. Anytime Walter Johnson's on the mound, like Washington's going to have a distinct advantage, I think, in this series. And the Pirates kind of have some pitchers, but they don't have like Walter Johnson. It's almost like not a replay of 1960, but it's like where the Yankees had like Whitey Ford and a really good pitcher, and I think Washington is the same kind of situation. They have a really good pitcher, so you're going to have to try and get to the other pitchers, and that's a big win for Washington because that kind of eliminates home field advantage at that moment for the Pirates since they lost the game at home. And I think we're still in the 2-3-2 format. So in game 2, the Pirates do win. Joe Judge's second inning home run off Vic Aldrich gave the Senators a win. Stan Kovaleski did not win. His spitball was hittable that day, I guess. They dried the ball off a little bit. Kyler hit a 2-run home run in the 8th. And that was set up by I talked about Roger Peckinpah as a shortstop for Washington. He made an error, and this is another critical error. Washington could have taken a stranglehold on the series, 2-0 going back to Washington, but I guess he would throw them into the stands occasionally. So they won 3-2. The Senators loaded the bases, but the Pirates got out of it. So, they're tied at 1 game apiece, and we're going into game 3, which is now the series is now moving to Washington, D.C. And this game is the pitcher. The Pirates actually, scored first, and I do believe Washington wins this one. No. Yes. And Sam Rice hit a leadoff home run. Joe Judge another double. The Pirates regained the lead in the 4th. Kiki Kyler hit a leadoff single. Joe Harris put them up. Next thing, the Senators loaded the bases on a walk and 2 singles, and then this Judge sacrifice fly tied the game. And then an RBI single by Joe Harris put them up 4-3. A key play in the 8th was Earl Smith's line drive in the center field was caught by Sam Rice, who fell into the temporary stands. And this is like a great story, I think. This is the one where it kept the Pirates from scoring, I think. And this is an infamous moment here, Tim. This is one of the controversial moments of this series. So this would be Sam Rice. This is like his most famous of his career. And it was game 3 of this series. And the Senators were leading the Pirates 4-3 in the middle of the 8th. And they had guys on, and somebody hit a ball into the stands. And Rice ran the ball down and peered to catch it at the fence. But when he did that, he went over the fence and into the stands. When he came out of the stands, the ball was in his glove. Now, some people thought that maybe he had dropped the ball in the stands, and the umpire's explanation was that as soon as the catch was made, the play was over. It did not matter where he, ended up in the stands. So everybody's thinking he dropped the ball in the stands, or you have to catch the ball in the field of play. You can't jump in the stands or on something and catch the ball. That's a rule too. So this is just Pirates fans sent signed and notarized documents claiming that they saw a fan pick up the ball and put it in Rice's glove. Now, Rice on his part said that he would not tell. He kind of pulls a Frenchy Fuqua. I'm not telling anybody. I'm taking this to my grave. Answering only, the umpire said I caught it. The infamous, if the judge says it, I'm going with it. Magazines literally offered to pay him for the story, but Rice turned them down, saying, I don't need the money. The mystery is more fun. So he's definitely on the Frenchy Fuqua scale of, did I touch it?
Yeah, that's smart. He gets to tell that story forever if he just sticks to that. That's a very smart play on his part.
Well, it gets better, Tim. We're not quite done with this guy yet. So he would not even tell his wife or his daughter. This guy won't even tell family members whether he caught it or not. So he was selected to the Hall of Fame. He wrote a letter when he was selected to the Hall of Fame to be opened upon his death. So he writes a letter about this catch and seals it and says, when I die, the Hall of Fame can open this. So, however, in an interview, his wife, Mary, said he did catch it. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So his wife thinks he's catch it, his family members, right? So what does the letter say, Tim? Here's what the letter said. Its conclusion stated, at no time did I lose possession of the ball.
Wow.
So he's saying he caught it, I guess.
Wow, that's pretty epic that he kept that all his life, and then he trolled everybody from the grave. That's
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about that. That's really impressive. Talk about just making the Supreme Court case out of a fly ball. That's pretty good.
Well, it was a big catch, and people maybe it was put in his glove, maybe it wasn't. So there's some game. I have some YouTube footage of this game. It's all obviously silent, and there's no commentary or sound at all. There's some great shots of President Coolidge throwing out a first pitch, and the reason is because the first talkie, the first picture with sound was the Jazz Singer, which would not come till 1927. And that was starring a gentleman named Al Jolson. And I do believe I have it, Al Jolson. Before the series, the papers had some cool quotes by some famous people. Pittsburgh will win every game in Pittsburgh because it'll be so black with smoke there that Washington players won't be able to even see the ball, giving the home team a decided advantage. So Pittsburgh living up to its smoky city, steel city, you know.
Well, you think the Pirates would have been undefeated every year at Forbes Field if that were actually true.
82-0, baby.
That's some Pittsburgh stereotyping there, Al Jolson.
Yeah. Coming from the guy that performed almost exclusively in blackface.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
go figure. So now they're up 2-1, and for game 4 they trot back out Walter Johnson. So yeah, we can you guess which way this one's going to go, Tim? Yes, the Pirates cannot hit Walter Johnson. It's his only postseason shutout, a 3-run home run by Goose Goslin, followed by a solo home run by Joe Harris. Put the Senators up 3-1.
Wow, so the Pirates are actually down 3-1 in this series.
Yes, Washington is now up 3-1, and as of 1925, no team has ever come back from being down 3-1 in the World Series. Bum bum bum. Yeah, there you go.
Lots of home runs in this series too. I mean, we were talking about.
Yeah. Well, this was in Washington, so I don't know how the dimensions of Griffith Stadium.
Okay, maybe it was a little different.
Yeah, maybe it was shorter. So, but yeah. So I mean, no heroic catches that were sealed in envelope needed. You just got to put Walter Johnson out there at his 90-mile-per-hour fastball, and that kind of takes care of business. And I think Walter Johnson might have completed. I don't know if he completed the whole game. They don't have any other pitchers listed, so I'm assuming he pitched 9 innings. On top of probably another 9 innings to game. So he's up to 18 innings in the series, Tim, is my point. He's pitched a lot. So the old pivotal game 5. 3-1, back against the wall. The sentimental favors are definitely the Washington Senators. What are those plucky old Pirates going to do? The Pirates, they actually load the bases in the first, but they fail to score. Sam Rice hit a double. The guy who won't tell you what happened in game 3. He hit a double, and but they get out of it. No, they score a couple runs, but the Pirates actually get to Stan Kovaleski. This is the spitball guy again, and they face off. But Kovaleski allows 4 runs before being pulled in the 7th, and it led to a 6-3 win. The Senators did cut the lead 4-3 in the bottom half of I think that was the 7th, but the Pirates got the run back in the bottom half of that inning. I think Peckinpah might have made another error somewhere along the way. So they win a big game against Kovaleski, who's not having a very good series pitching. He gives up 6 runs in a game that could have been the World Series for the old Washington Senators there. So now we're coming back to Pittsburgh down 3-2 in a game 6. And so what is Bucky Harris, or the manager for the Senators and second baseman, he trots out Alex Ferguson. Alex Ferguson is the Senators get a run first on Goose Goslin's home run, and then they add another run in the second on Roger Peckinpah's RBI double. But the Pirates come back, and Ray Kramer, the pitcher, would shut them out afterward in the third with the runners on second and third. And Clyde Barnhart's ground out, and Pie Trainer's single scored a run each to tie the game. Eddie Moore's 5th inning home run put the Pirates up 3-2, and they actually finished this game 3-2. The Pirates have like a lot of different pitchers that they kind of trot out there, like 4 or 5, whereas, like I said, like I think Washington's just kind of riding Walter Johnson. They were hoping Kovaleski, who had a great year the year before, just is not doing them any favors. So, and this Ferguson guy isn't either. So that leads us to the penultimate game 7 series tied 3-3. And this is where the weather comes into play. It's October 15th. I think actually they'd meant to play it a couple days earlier, but it had rained. They had delayed the game. And they actually played this game in a rain, in like a fog. According to Goose Goslin, it was pouring like mad from the 3rd inning on. And by the 7th inning, it was so foggy, he couldn't see what was going on in the infield.
Why did they still play it then?
Well, that was that, like, there's obviously been like, controversy about that. Like, that they actually wanted Kennesaw Mountain Landis to suspend the game, but he just didn't. He was like, nope, we're playing it. He said, yeah, you guys bet on baseball. You can go play in the rain. I don't know. Yeah. So the Pirates pitched 4 different pitchers that game. So they kind of go with almost like a modern strategy, huh? Like, whereas like the Senators and Bucky Harris, a player, are just, we're going with Walter Johnson. I don't blame him. That's their best pitcher, but maybe Walter Johnson is running out of gas here, right, Tim? So the Senators load the base in the first. There's like a catcher interference call that allowed 2 runs in the third, and the Senators were out 4-0, but the Pirates cut the lead 4-3. In the fourth, Joe Harris's 2-run double extended Washington's lead 6-3. So the Pirates are down 6-3 in the 4th inning.
Wow.
But yeah, back-to-back doubles by Carey and Kiki Kyler. Gee, I wonder why these guys are in the Hall of Fame. In the 5th, cut the lead to 6-4. And then in the 7th, Moore reached first on an error. And that was another Roger Peckinpah, I think, in Trainer's RBI triple tied the game. Now, Roger Peckinpah redeems himself, and he hits a home run in the 8th off Ray Kramer to put the Pirates back atop 7-6.
The Senators, you mean?
Yeah, the Senators back on top 7-6. But in the bottom half, back-to-back doubles by Earl Smith and Carson Bigby tied the game. And a walk-in fielder's choice load the bases before Kyler's 2-run double that put the Pirates atop 9-7. And about that double, once again, this is Goose Goslin talking about the rain. He swears to goodness, this is another controversial thing, that Kiki Kyler's 2-run double down the right field line that broke the 7-7 tie in the bottom of the 8th was foul by 2 feet because it landed in the mud and stuck there. And other versions say Kyler's hit was a ground rule double into the crowd. So I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those things. I guess losers whine and winners win. I don't know.
Well, obviously,
movie tone news replay wasn't there to, ooh, look, it's, it's in the mud,
Well, obviously, if it was foul, then that wouldn't have counted. But I mean, if it was a ground rule double, they still would have taken the lead, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they had guys on base, and then like that was another editor. Like, it's like GOAT to hero for Roger Peckinpah. Like, he's like, oh, I made all this errors and I hit this great home run in the 8th, and then he makes another error and screws it up. And this is another case too. Like, there was a rock in the infield at Forbes Field that like caused him to like make an error. So once again, whoever is dragging the fields of Forbes Field for a 7th game of World Series does a fantabulous job. I mean, I'll give you 1925. Maybe it wasn't as skilled as it is now, but they, gotta love it. The grounds crew of Forbes Field has got another winner on their hands. So the 8th inning, there's more of a summary. There was 2 outs, 0-2 count. Actually, the Pirates were down to one of their last strikes, and they got a hit. They did all this with 2 outs in the 8th.
Wow.
Yeah, so let's see how else. The game was held up. Oh, yeah, and Walter Johnson, like, it was raining so bad. The crowd in the uproar, Johnson clearly struggled. Moore draws a walk. That was actually his first walk of the game in that 8th. Carey then grounded the Peckinpah, who threw to second base for the force out, but the umpire ruled that Harris was off the bag. That was Roger Peckinpah's 8th error of the series. and that still stands as a record to this day. So good for him, I guess. The game was held up in the 8th inning as they tried to spread more sawdust. I guess they didn't have like the diamond dry and stuff, so it just throw like sawdust out there on the field to kind of soak up the mud. So in the 9th inning, the Pirates now leading 9-7 after trailing almost the whole game. Journeyman southpaw Red Oldman, who had appeared in only 11 games for the Pirates, ascended the treacherous mound to try and seal the championship. And he had some sort of, they called it a crossfire delivery. So maybe it's a sidearm. I don't know. So the Rice tried to bunt, missed for strike, then took a sweeping curve for strike 3. Bucky Harris, the manager, popped up to Moore, and Goslin complained about strike 2. Boy, this guy cries a lot, doesn't he? Then he took a strike 3 to end the series. Like he pulled who's that, Manny Machado, or not Manny Machado. He was the guy for the Tigers that took strike 3 a couple years back in the World Series.
Yeah, that's a terrible way to end the World Series.
It's just like, I just kind of sat there and watched it.
Yep.
That was another, like, there was a pop-up in the 8th inning too that Peckinpah misplayed too. So they said during the outfield, the outfielders were outlines. Vagan shit. Twice Walter Johnson asked for a delay. They might get sawdust. Rain was literally dripping from the big train's chin as he pitched. This is according to the New York Times. A massive spontaneous parade of revelers streamed down Fifth Avenue from Oakland, where Forbes Field obviously was. Some of the post-game comments. Kennesaw Landis said he would be roundly criticized for ever starting the game. Mesh let continue. He didn't say much. Bill McKechnie, the manager of the Pirates, I'm just too happy for words. I don't know, as he visited the 2 playoffs. It was a great series. I'm simply overcome. So are the players. Look at them. They're like a bunch of madmen, and no wonder. We just won a tough ball game and a tough World Series, and we're expecting sensation of baseball champions of the world. This is one of the happiest days of my life. It's simply great. We showed them a wonderful we're a wonderful ball club in this series, and particularly today. It was tough out there playing on the field in the rain. Of course, it was tough for each side, but that doesn't alter the fact that the playing conditions were terrible. So Bucky Harris, who's the manager, was crestfallen. He voiced resentment over the final game being played under such conditions, as also his displeasure as the system that caused the series to start and finish in Pittsburgh. They actually, in the old days, they used the coin flip to decide where Game 7 would be held. So instead of this newfangled 2-3-2 stuff. Actually, I mean, a coin flip why? Maybe because there were so many, the records were tied, and I don't know. I would think you could figure it out like ties and runs for, runs against, then maybe like coin flip the 5th tiebreaker or something. Normally that's what you do. You have 3 or 4 tiebreakers, and a coin flip is the last one.
I guess you could argue, since they were such, back then it was 2 separate leagues.
Yeah.
That if you're going to use a tiebreaker, it's apples to oranges, because if the Pirates had 95 wins, they were playing against a totally different set of teams than the Senators were playing against. If the Senators would have had, 92 wins.
Yeah.
So I guess you could make that argument.
Johnson embraced Peck at Peckinpah after the game. Gracious as always. Walter Johnson refused to use the weather or his sore leg as an excuse and took the blame himself. So Walter Johnson's at least a class act, and I can see why people really liked him. He was pitching in mud. Like, I've read that too. The New York Times, in the wettest, weirdest, and wildest game that 50 years of baseball have ever seen, the Pirates today proved the right to the mud horse, twilight, and all other championships of the national game. Water, mud, fog, mist, sawdust, fumbles, muffs, wild throws, wild pitches, one near fist fight, impossible rallies. These were mixed up to make the best and worst game of baseball ever played in this country. Players wallowing ankle deep in mud, pitchers slipping as they delivered the ball to the plate, athletes skidding and sloshing, falling full length and dropping soaked baseballs. There you have part of the picture that was unveiled on Forbes Field this dripping afternoon. In a grave of mud was buried Walter Johnson's ambition to join that select panel of pitchers who have won 3 victory in 1 World Series. With mud shackling his ankles and water running down his neck, the grand old man of baseball succumbed to weariness, a sore-legged, wretched support in the most miserable weather conditions that ever confronted a pitcher. So, very nice summary from Harrison at the New York Times.
Yeah, and I certainly get the controversy, but it's not like it gave one team an advantage over the other.
Well, it wasn't
You
like
know?
the Pirates had like this perfect playing field, when
Right.
they're
Right. I could
and
see if I could see if it was like a football game and you had a running team versus a passing team or whatever. But literally the Senators had them 2 outs in the 8th inning with the lead.
yeah,
So it's not
and
like
their
one
best
team.
pitcher on the mound, but like
Right.
I think they just pitched them too much. They just used them a little bit too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
And
mean,
he was 37, Tim. Like 30.
yeah,
Like
but
how many pitchers at 37 could I mean, even
he's
today,
yeah, but he was 1 out away from getting out of that inning, and then it would have been I guess the Pirates still would have had the bottom of the 9th. But I mean, he was 4 outs away from doing it, even at that.
Yeah, and
So,
they were up 3-1. I mean, I once again, I think it was smart, like the manager saving him for Game 7 and giving him an extra rest after he picked Game 4. So this is a little different than the 1960 where we kind of felt like, what's his name? Who's the manager?
Casey Stengel.
Yeah, kind of burned Whitey Ford, and
Yeah,
didn't
and
have-
you would definitely never see a pitcher being left in after he surrendered 6 runs, because it was 7-6 at
And
the end of the
according,
8th.
if I'm reading it correctly, before that 8th inning, he already pitched 18. What's 18 plus 8? Is that
Yeah.
26
Yeah.
innings? 26 innings in a World Series?
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess back then that was just what you did. Although that's not to your point, that's not what the Pirates did. It wasn't like that was unheard of to use multiple pitchers. I guess they just thought Walter Johnson's an all-time great, and you just leave him in, and you either win with him or you lose with him, because nobody else on the staff, as they proved in the other games, nobody else on the staff was
well,
anywhere
when they couldn't
close
throw
to.
their spitballs, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
And like you said, like spitball wasn't just like puh, puh. Like you would take it and rub it in the dirt. And
Right.
you would like take tobacco juice and like they didn't change the balls out like early, so the ball would like by the 6th inning you couldn't see it. It was like all black. Like, and never mind on a day like today, like not today, but in
With the rain,
October
yeah.
15th, 1925, in the rain.
Yeah.
So anyway, as for a little bit of an epilogue, Max Carey, he had a 343 batting average. He had that deciding double. He led all average 458, led all players in the series. So he had pretty awesome. Kiki Kyler had that 2-run double in the bottom of the 8th that made the score 9-7. That was the only time Kyler would win a World Series. Walter Johnson's record of 3,508 strikeouts stood for more than 55 years until Nolan Ryan, Steve Carlton, Gaylord Perry all surpassed it in that order during the 1983 season. Johnson, as of 2017, ranks 9th on the all-time strikeout list. Among the pre-World War II contemporary, the only 2 men with 1,000 strikeouts were Johnson and Cy Young. Tim Keefe and Bob Feller both had over 2,500 strikeouts. So, he won a World Series in 1924. In 1927, Johnson's request for an unconditional release from the club was granted. He was one of the first, the first 5 players elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. It was Ty Cobb, Christy Mathewson, and Babe Ruth, and of course, Honus Wagner. Clark Griffith, he died, the owner of the Washington Senators. He died in 1955. His nephew and adopted son, Calvin, took over the team presidency. They sold Griffith Stadium to the city of Washington and leased it back. Imagine that, a team not wanting to have a ownership of a stadium. The speculation was the team was going to move, which the team did in 1960, which they moved to the Minnesota Twins, and the Twins still haven't won a road World Series game since 1925.
Wow, but they've won 2 World Series.
Yeah. The old Washington Senators became the new Minnesota Twins. So baseball kind of pulled a Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Ravens move when the team came back in the league in 1961. So, and then they would move again in 1972 into Texas and became the Texas Rangers. And baseball would not come back to Washington until 2005, when the former Montreal Expos became the Washington Nationals. And of course, the Nationals won the World Series in 2019, and that was Washington's first World Series win since 1924. So,
wow,
almost 100 years for long-suffering fans of the Washington baseball franchises. So what happened with Max Carey, Fred Clark, and Bill McKechnie? Well, there was a very ugly team incident the next season, which I've alluded to. Well, actually, yeah, 1926. Fred Clark, who is now the team vice president and serving, he would sit on the bench, boss, try and tell Bill McKechnie what to do. So he actually wanted he wanted somebody to get benched here. Carey, he wanted Max Carey to get benched. Well, they didn't like that, so the players all voted to remove Fred Clark from the bench. So Bill McKechnie actually sided with the players at first, but then when ownership found out about it, you got to remember this is 1926, so ownership and unions, and there wasn't a baseball union, and you just kind of did whatever the owners told you to do. That was kind of how it worked back then. So they got rid of Adams and Bigby, who were two of the people that they thought. And then Carey was suspended because Carey's a good player, and good players don't get kicked off the team. But then the Pirates did place Carey on waivers, and he was claimed by some team called the Brooklyn Robins. Carey played his final 3.5 years with the Robins. He really wasn't the same player. He retired in 1929. Max Carey did return to the Pirates as a coach in the 1930 series. Bill McKechnie, for all his craziness in that whole situation where the players started to revolt against Fred Clark, he actually got fired after 1926. That whole incident in 1926 kind of killed this team. They were never quite the same. But don't cry too hard. He would go on and win pennants with 3 different teams. Bill McKechnie also won World Series with the Cincinnati Reds in 1940. He was an assistant manager on the Cleveland Indians World Series in 1948. Hey, have Cleveland won a World Series? No, hey, Cleveland hasn't won a World Series since 1948 either. Well, boo-hoo for them. Maybe they should have kept Bill McKechnie a little longer. I don't know. McKechnie was the first manager to win World Series titles with 2 different teams. He remains one of only 2 managers to win pennants with 3 teams. He's, of course, inducted in the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1962. He retired to Bradenton, Florida, Tim. And can you imagine what is in Bradenton, Florida? That would be the Pirates' spring training home. McKechnie Field, which was named after Bill McKechnie, has now been, Bob Nutting, being the sentimental type that he is, sold the naming rights to that stadium for cash money, and they renamed it Lee Calm Field. So the heck with you, Bill McKechnie, and you're not siding with management ways. So
they got him. It's just funny that the ownership continued to get him back for years and years after that incident.
Different owners,
yeah,
hundreds of years removed.
Yeah.
So take that, Bill McKechnie. Kiki Kyler was part of the decision to remove Fred Clark. He actually compiled over 200 hits over 3 separate seasons. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1968 by the Veterans Committee. He had a lot of injuries. He finished out his career with the Cubs, where he never really won another World Series. Kyler was known around the league as a polite, shy kind of player. One of the fellow Hall of Famer Joe Cromer said he was one of the finest and cleanest living fellows I ever met. Kyler was an established star when I joined the Pirates, but he was always willing to help. He was a model. The Sporting News stated that he was a model on and off the field. Isn't that nice? Fred Clark was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1945. He was one of the first to be elected by the Old Timers Committee. He was one of the 24 original inductees into the Iowa Sports Hall of Fame. Ooh, sounds prestigious. In 1947, while fishing in northern Minnesota, he and his wife were thrown into the icy water by a storm, but he was back out the next day. He was also almost shot while quail hunting. He survived a gas furnace explosion. You just can't get rid of Fred Clark there. He's a tough old bird.
Can't get him off the bench. Can't get him off the planet.
Yeah. So finally, he passed away at age 87. You figured this dude lived through like influenza, two world wars, and his gas furnace explosions and falling in a lake.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say something like finally he passed away from, COVID in 2021.
Yeah.
At 127 years old or whatever.
Yeah. For Pie Traynor, he led NL third baseman and put out 7 times, double play 4 times, assist 3 times. His 4-1 double plays in 1925 were now a record until 1950. His putouts remain the highest NL total since 1905. He set major league records for career double plays and at third base. That was finally broken in 1945 and 1960. He became inducted to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1948, become the initial third baseman elected by the Baseball Writers Hall of Fame of America. The Pirates as a organization did return to the World Series in 1927, but they were swept by some team from New York that may have had, Gehrig and, Ruth and a bunch of other guys who could really hit a bunch of home runs. The Pirates remained competitive throughout the 1930s, but failed to win the pennant. The closest they came was in 1938 when they were passed by the Chicago Cubs in the final week of the season. And of course, they went on another long World Series drought. They didn't make the World Series against until 1960. And we've covered that World Series too.
We have.
So some nagging questions. Why is this World Series so forgotten? Why doesn't anybody remember it? I think number one, the Senators don't exist anymore. So they're not really a team that anybody would ever talk about. Nobody's going to talk about the Texas Rangers or I guess it would technically be the Twins. So nobody really talks about them. It's not really recent. It's like I said, it's almost going to be 100 years old since this happened. There's no TV footage of it. There's nobody, really that remembers it. There's nobody like Babe Ruth or the Yankees weren't in it. Walter Johnson is famous, but because he doesn't have a team that is so ballyhooed. I think too, Walter Johnson is famous, but because he played on the Washington team, it doesn't really relive wherever you go. Oh, Babe Ruth, the Yankees, there's no Minnesota Twins, Walter Johnson, nobody ever thinks of that. Who do you think of Minnesota Twins? I don't know. That pitcher with the funky mustache, right?
Yeah, Harmon Killebrew or even Jack Morris, some of
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's what I think of.
Yeah.
So there's no real guy you think of with that organization.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're right, because once you usually celebrate the history of the players that played on that franchise, not the one that was in a different city. Does the current Washington team celebrate, I don't know, Tim Raines? Because the Expos players probably not the same thing.
Hey, here's another burning question. Why do the Pirates only win World Series in 7 games? And another fun fact are the Pirates are 5-0 in Game 7s. You don't want to play the Pirates in Game 7 of your World Series. You're going to be in trouble, right?
Yeah, we covered that in the last Fun Facts episode, and it's the odds of that are pretty amazing. A 1-game thing, and they won all 5. I just think the odds of that are And then how many times did they come back from 3-1? Because they did it again in what, 79?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's also pretty rare. So yeah, don't want to get to a Summit game in the World Series against the Pirates, but fortunately, none of the other 20 something Major League Baseball teams will have to worry about that anytime in the near future.
So, that's just kind of all I have on that. The Pirates win the 1925 World Series. We should remember it for the people, Kiki Kyler, Pie Trainer, and, some of the pitchers, I'm Aldridge and some of the other guys that had great World Series. Walter Johnson never appeared in another World Series. He retired by the time the Senators made the World Series in 1933 again. Good for them. Good for Kiki Kyler and Max Carey and, Pie Trainer and all the Pirate fans of that era that I'm sure Al Jolson is still boo-hooing over all the smoke in Pittsburgh. So suck it, Washington and New York. I hope you enjoyed that walk down, I don't know, informative walk down memory lane, kind of, maybe, sort of. Thanks for tuning in, and check us out on all your usual podcast stuff. So we'll have some links, I'm sure, and fun facts, and you can all laugh at Al Jolson later. And thanks for tuning in.